All right, well, welcome everybody. My name's Todd Cusimano. I'm your town manager. This is our fifth workshop series in the last year of just community items. We've talked about flood control, coyotes. We've talked about budget, and today's about the sanitary district and our sewer lateral policy, because there's a lot to it. And just as your town manager, it's complicated. Over the last year, I've really had to educate myself on what the issues are, and are we doing what others are doing? Why do we have to do this? What does it look like? What can we do to partner with our community? I look at the ordinance when you talk about the sewer lateral policy, right? So the laterals, and we're going to talk about it, it's the responsibility of the homeowner. It's kind of like sidewalks. It's the same thing. But I think as we step back and think about this, what can we do to partner as a town and as a community to help understand the problem and help from a financial standpoint, make sure that we're set now and in the future. So when I became your town manager 2 years ago, the council really focused on in the community was like, let's have process. Like whatever we do as a town, let's have a process. Let's all understand what it is. Let's have some community forums about what we're doing and understand it, and then set that process for the future, right? So 10 years from now, you have a whole new council and staff. The community knows what the expectation is. You're not going through the ups and downs of different philosophies and things like that. So process is really important. So we brought in our team. I'm really excited about it. Peter Brown is our Public Works Director and our District Manager of the Sanitary District. Fernanda will be here in a second. She's our engineer, and she oversees the Sanitary District as well. Eli Beckman is our council member, and he's also our representative on the Central Marin Sanitation Authority, CMSA. That's a fun one to be on. So we're all here. We don't want to talk at you. We want to just do a PowerPoint. Hopefully you all have a copy of it. We'll have it on the website. We'll get you a copy. We're videotaping this meeting, and so we'll put it on the website as well. So please direct people to it. And it's a continued conversation. This isn't to talk at you and say we've decided to do this. Now the ordinance is the ordinance, and we'll talk about why it came about, why we're doing this. But there's still some philosophical decisions that the council is ultimately going to have to make. And so really we want to have a series of discussions with the community to talk to you about that. Please ask questions. Hopefully we don't keep you here longer than an hour. I have to actually pick up my daughter, so I have to leave at 7:15 for volleyball. So we'll get this done as quick as possible. So I'm going to turn it over to Peter, but again, I just want you, hopefully a 20-minute presentation, and let's really dive into what's important to you, and please ask questions, and we'll work through this. So thanks for being here, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Peter.
All right. Thanks, Todd. And although our voices project pretty well, we're recording this, and so the microphone, when I do Q&A, I'm going to walk around and hand you the microphone and ask you to speak into it so we can record everybody's comments and thoughts and questions and recommendations. As with any good PowerPoint, we just want to kind of let you know what is going to happen. So this is the outline. This is page 2. You heard from Todd, and you're going to hear from me for the next 20 to 30 minutes. And then Fernanda is going to take a couple of the slides as well, and when she walks in, we'll introduce her. She's actually making a few more copies of the slideshow. So the sanitary sewer system that the sanitary district manages, you all know the function. We have 5 board members. They serve as the town council. Then they put on a different hat, and they serve as the sanitary district board. And then Todd and I, of course, report to them in both occasions. We want to talk about what the responsibilities are of the sanitary district. So it's a little bit of SD2 101, which I find fascinating. Hopefully you will too. Then we're going to talk about the actual PSL. I'm going to use the term PSL for private sewer lateral ordinance. That's the property owner's responsibility. So the municipal code says that the property owner owns the lateral and has to replace it, has to maintain it. I know some members of the audience want that to change, and that is certainly open for discussion. Then we're going to talk about the triggers and exemptions, what actually causes you to have to do something to your lateral. And then on the other side, what makes you exempt? Maybe you don't have to do anything to your lateral. So we're going to talk about those things. In some cases in town, we have shared private sewer lateral, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that. That happens both with residential and commercial properties. A little bit about HOAs. I think Todd is most interested in the discussion on options for town-initiated projects. Sanitary district or the town may start a capital improvement. What do we do in those cases? How do we address laterals? A little bit about fee structures and what neighboring jurisdictions do. And then, of course, the goal for me, and I think for Todd as well, and hopefully for all of you, is to improve our understanding of the private sewer lateral ordinance and then to consider how it's functioning. And we're certainly, it's an ordinance. We change ordinances on a regular basis, and so it's not set in stone. It can be improved. There's no doubt about that. And then we'll obviously get into the group discussion. So an overview, what I did in the slideshow, Fernanda put a lot of this together, so I got to credit her. Normally on a slideshow, you want things to be really pithy and to the point. And we erred on the side of detail here so that you could take these home with you. And what we put on the website has a lot of information. So I'm not going to read all of the slides to you. Fernanda Stefanik, Sanitary District 2 engineer, thank you for coming. She's making extra copies, so I asked her to do that before the meeting. So this is just kind of an example of when you see these really wordy slides, what matters to me in the delivery of this is that you know that Sanitary District 2 is a sewer collection agency, right? We don't treat wastewater. The Central Marin Sanitation Agency, they do the treatment, right? So we deliver the sewage to them. They charge us around $1 million a year to treat the sewage, and you all pay for that through your sewage fees. And so they treat the water. A little bit of, so you know how we have a gravity system, we have pump stations, we have force mains. Does everybody understand the difference between a force main and a gravity main? Okay, so a force main is pressurized. So it has to be watertight. We force sewage water down the main at pounds per square inch, anywhere from 10 to 100 PSI. So if if you pump up your bike tire to 100 PSI, that's a lot of pressure in there, right? So one of the things that's interesting we'll get into is sometimes some of our pump stations pump through the force mains at such a high pressure that the other mains that come in downstream can't force enough water in there. So we're having to upgrade our pump stations downstream simply to be able to have wastewater enter the system when there's high flows because the force is so high. 45 miles of gravity sewers. And one of the things that Fernanda and Todd and I are working on is that, vitrified clay pipe is the standard from 1900 until about 1970 or 80. And it doesn't hold up well. It does well if there's no change, there's no settlement, there's no weight. Clay pipe can do fine, but for the most part, almost all of our clay pipes crack and break and are imperfect. So when I say we're going towards stronger, more modern materials, that's because we know we can do things a lot better. So as we replace portions of the sanitary district, gravity mains and force mains, we no longer allow clay pipe. You cannot replace anything with clay pipe anymore. It's outdated technology. So a few fun maps. So the sanitary district is larger than the town of Corte Madera. And I put these red lines on here so that you can see that the town limit ends here, but this is all sanitary district. So this portion of Tiburon is part of SD2. The same thing with Larkspur up here. So the Green Bay Boardwalk, this is all part of SD2. And the neighborhoods over here that are in Larkspur are part of SD2 and then unincorporated county. So SD2 is a subsidiary district of the town of Corte Madera, but it is larger. We have about 5,800 laterals within the district. And I think we only have, and Todd, maybe you know how many homes we have in Corte Madera. I think it's more like 4,000 or so single family homes, but 5,800 laterals. So you can see how much larger the district is. On the pump stations, we have 19 pump stations. And sometimes when you follow sanitary district or council items, you hear this term pump stations. This is just how we move the water. In this case, the wastewater. We have 10 flood control pump stations and 19 sanitary district pump stations. And does anybody know what the largest pump station is for the sanitary district? Guesses?
Paradise.
Todd knows. Paradise. So here's all of them in the areas that they serve. And you can kind of see we have them all named. And one of Fernanda's jobs right now, since she started working with us on July 1st, is to evaluate the age, functionality, the control panels, how all these pump stations are working. And what she's told me for the last 6 months is a lot of them need work. A lot of them need replacement. A lot of them need new control panels. So we're using your sewer fees to invest in the system. So here's just how much Paradise is. So of all the pump stations, they feed Paradise. So right now, we estimate around 90 to 95% of all effluent comes through the Paradise pump station. That's about a $20 million facility. And it's state of the art. And one thing we should do is have a tour of it. I would love to set it up, to open it up to the community and walk you all through it. It doesn't smell great, but it is fascinating to see how the pump station works. And so this is that example I was giving you. So Fernanda is managing the Pfeiffer pump station upgrade project right now, which is $700,000. And one of the problems we have at Pfeiffer is in the wintertime when Paradise, the force main for Paradise runs this way, and we deliver everything to CMSA up here by Larkspur Landing. But when we have heavy flows and all the pumps for Paradise are pumping, Pfeiffer tries to pump water into the main and they can't get it in. So that's a problem, right? So then Pfeiffer pump station backs up. And so we've had that issue. And so it's one of the reasons why we're upgrading Pfeiffer. Another way to look at it is when the year installed. So Fernanda's really good at GIS, Geographic Information Systems, in this map. If it was installed between 23 and 64, it's purple. The newest ones are gray. And so that's when the age of the system. So this helps us understand one of the tools we use to determine where to put investments. The older tends to be the need of most investments. So to the PSL, the purpose of the ordinance is to provide for the operation and maintenance of SD2 wastewater conveyance, right? Because we just deliver the water, and the treatment facilities for more safe, reliable, and serviceable manner. So you all know that the board adopted the ordinance on June 4th, and they asked us, we don't want more outreach. We want the community to know more about it. So we're a little late to the game, but we're happy to do this workshop and others if needed. And so the other point is that the ordinance affects all property owners in the area. This is a slide, I won't read everything, but it kind of tells you what CMSA is, the Central Marin Sanitation Agency, its key members. Larkspur is actually seeking withdrawal right now because they're being served by Ross Valley. So these are no longer separate entities. So the city of Larkspur is encompassed within the Ross Valley Sanitation District. And they are seeking withdrawal officially from the Joint Powers Association. And then this is something that we'll touch on a few times. So I would read this bullet is probably the most important one. So we have what's called an NPDES permit. It's issued by the state and the Regional Water Quality Control Board to the Central Marin Sanitation Agency. And for the first time in January of last year, all JPA members are now permittees. So it used to be that in order to discharge wastewater, the permit was issued to CMSA alone, and Ross Valley, Santa Fe, and us were not part of that permit. Now we are. And so we are monitored by the regional board, the state board, and ultimately national, because it's a national permit. So Roy, I'll take a few questions, but I kind of want to power through this, but I'll have you use the mic. Do you want to ask now or later?
On Larkspur City, is that a good thing for Sanitary District that Larkspur is leaving, that is from a financial standpoint?
Yeah. My assessment, and Eli, if you want to chime in, let me know, is that it's neither good nor bad. It's mostly indifferent in terms of their withdrawal. Sure.
It sounded at our last CMSA meeting like the general manager of CMSA has worked with the financial team at CMSA and has determined that there's going to be no impact to bondholders. So.
Okay, we like, I guess as the sanitary district, we like no negative impacts. That's good. Okay, marching along. So now when I talk about the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, which is federal regulation, we call it the NPDES. This is the permit that everyone, and I'm going to tell a little story, Who remembers February 2017 rain levels? Anybody? It rained like 20 or 21 inches in the month of February. And so what happened is it was our greatest test of the integrity of the system for Ross Valley, Santa Fe, and SD2. And what we found out is that between 8 and 9 million gallons come in to the CMSA. At this time during this event, we had 120 to 140 million gallons a day coming in. So it was like a 12 to 15-fold increase over what we normally see. What that tells us is our system is imperfect. We have a lot of breaks. We have a lot of inflow into the system. And we should have a sealed sewer system, but we don't. So that's part of the reason why we're going through this particular process. So what happened with the NPDES permit is all the agencies had to list their top capital improvements, the ones that we believed would provide the most integrity to restore the system, and a sewer lateral ordinance was named. So we were basically required to implement this. It's a good thing from decreasing sewage spills and inflow and infiltration, but it does have an impact to the community, which I'm sure you all are interested in. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So Fernanda found some great graphics, and this is another reason why we wanted you to have this handout to take home, but we use the term I&I for inflow and infiltration. And in black, you see what inflow is, and in white, you see what infiltration is. So what happened in terms of that storm of February 2017 was the infiltration test was failed. So we had a whole bunch of infiltration into our system, which is why the volume at the sewage treatment plant went up so much. And just so you all know, there are multiple levels to treat wastewater. When I worked in Sonoma County in Santa Rosa, they had built a tertiary treatment plant. So it's 3 different levels of treatment. And the water comes out, you'll see some board members occasionally, they will drink tertiary treated water. It's more of a publicity stunt than anything else. This is tap water. What you don't typically do is drink secondary treated water. So that's what we have at CMSA. So the way a secondary water treatment plant works is that you use microbiota that digest and process the wastewater. And then it's clean enough, it's not clean enough to drink, but it's clean enough to discharge into the bay. And the balance of the microbiota at the treatment plant is super important. So if you think about how many microorganisms you need to treat 9 million gallons in a huge pond, what would happen if you put 140 million gallons in it? Well, you would probably just wash all of the microbiota away, and your whole ability to treat future wastewater goes away. So it's a very tricky balance. And so what CMSA had to do in February 2017 was bypass. So they had to send what amounts to raw sewage into the bay or ruin their entire treatment plant. So that's part of the reason why this is so important, because of the balance of a secondary treatment plant. This is straight out of the ordinance. Again, this is kind of one of those slides that has a lot of information in it. But just for definitions, what is a sewer lateral? It's owned by a property owner. It's just like owning a roof or a wall or a driveway. It's something you own. But it conveys sewage from a building to the sanitary district's collection system. It's broken down. I know Roy has his favorite version of a graphic, which we can talk about in Q&A. But we sometimes distinguish between upper and lower laterals. It's all, according to our ordinance, owned by the property owner, including the connection. So the lower is typically between the property line and the main. The upper is between the property line and the building. And clean outs are required. So before, I think, Fernanda got here, there wasn't a lot of attention paid to clean outs. But now when she reviews permits and looks at all kinds of new development, she requires clean outs to be put in so that we can easily access the system and make sure it's clean.
And also protect your home, because if the main get plugged, the sewage, instead of going to your house, inside your house in the lower point, comes outside. So you can see, you can smell, but doesn't damage your property.
That's super important. So absent cleanouts, if you can think about it, if there's a backup in the system, I don't know if anyone in this room has experienced it, but it does happen that sometimes the sewage comes all the way back up and spouts out in your bathroom, and that is a worst case scenario. Okay, so upper, lower. So here are the triggers. These are the 4 triggers. So if you, let's say you want to improve your home, you want to remodel your kitchen, you want to add a secondary unit, whatever it is, if you're doing more than $50,000 worth of value, you meet a private sewer lateral ordinance trigger. So we say that, okay, if you're doing $50,000 of work, we want you to inspect your lateral, send a camera down there, tell us what condition it's in. If it's in good condition, great. If it needs repair, you need to repair it as part of that project. If a property is sold or has a transfer of title, that's another great time to say, okay, I'm selling I think the median price in Corte Madera is $1.4 million. If I'm selling my $1.4 million home, it's a great time to make sure that the lateral is replaced and inspected and replaced if needed. Another time is when a capital improvement project is led by the town, say repaving your road, or the district. A district capital improvement might be, we've inspected our main, whether it's a gravity main or a force main, and we need to do an improvement. Therefore, we want to make sure that all the laterals that connect to that main are also improved at the same time. And then this is kind of the catch-all. If we believe that there is a public health threat, that a spill has occurred, or that a spill might occur, then that is another trigger that we want to make sure and protect from.
One thing that Peter didn't mention, like if a building permit is adding a bathroom or fixture counts that is under 50,000, but is adding fixtures, then gonna generate more sewage waste, or a kitchen, we also inspect the sewer to make sure the condition, because you're throwing more waste.
Okay, good call. So this is the last slide I'm going to do. I'm going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to turn it over to Fernanda for a couple slides, and then we'll power through to the end. I think we're on target so far. So this is a section of the code, the municipal code, that I thought everyone should be aware of, 21.20.060, and this kind of relates back to the previous slide in that the code pretty clearly spells out that the property owner is responsible for the maintenance and ownership, as well as pressure tight and in good working order at all times, which makes sense. If we're talking about conveying sewage, we don't want to say, your sewer lateral should be good 200 days out of the year, right? We're saying 365 days out of the year. We want that lateral to be in good working order and pressure tight. So I'll turn these next 2 slides over to Fernanda.
The one point there that you just made. Now, we updated our ordinance, but our previous ordinance that was enacted for a few decades, ownership didn't change. It was the same language.
Yeah,
right?
It said the same thing. The only language that's new is this pressure tight language. All the rest of it has to be in good working orders. Who owns it, who maintains it, it's all the same thing. But we didn't really have a way to say, how is all this happening? So what we did when we talked to our legal team and Fernanda looked at all the other ordinances in the Bay Area, and we said, well, this is kind of the tool. Good point, Todd. The one thing we changed there was adding the term pressure tight.
Was the only way to see if there's leaking in the system. If you don't pressure test, you can really, by visualize, can tell that it's not leaking on the pipe. So exceptions. We are giving extra 6 months for people that have share sewer laterals. So they can extend for another 6 days. Usually with the notice repair, we give 6 months, 180 days. And for share laterals, because they need to coordinate with neighbors and work a deal to make the replacement, we are extending another 180 days. So we're giving a year for the neighbors get together and fix the lateral. If there is no agreement, we do recommend to separate the lines, and each one would have your own sewer line. And we work to guide on that. But it's your responsibility. Most have agreements with neighbors or easements. If you don't, and you know you have a share, you should work on agreement or easement with your neighbor. We are giving 3 years to homeowner associations that manage their laterals. So they can apply for a 3-year blanket. They can inspect their whole system by televised, and we work with the HOA, with a 3 years blanket to repair, to fix it, and have it done. Prior repair of a sewer lateral. So if you did a repair previous, we're giving you 3 years prior to the date. So like you repaired 3 years ago. We was permit by the town. We have a permit on the record, was inspected by the town. You are good for 3 years. If past these 3 years, today is the year 4, you're going to inspect your line. If pass a pressure test, I will give you another 3 years blanket. So we don't need to replace the whole line, but do need to pass a pressure test. And we are giving 10 years with a proof of prior replacement. So you replaced 5 years ago, we have a permit, and it was pressure test and inspected by the town. You're good for 10 year from the date of the inspection that was done when the lateral was replacement. Or if you replace today, you just apply for permit, you're going to get a letter for 10 years from today. So how to apply and how to receive the certification. If you are triggered by any of the 4 triggers, then you saw previews, you're going to come and apply for a sewer permit for the pressure test, or if you know that you need to repair or replace for the work you need to be done. Just a reminder, the video inspection doesn't give you the compliance. That is the inspection on the pipe previous to the pressure test to make sure you can do the pressure test. You're not going to blow your neighbor's toilet, or you have a second lateral come in and you didn't know, you could blow that one too. So no plumber licensed contractor would plug your line without televising. Most of the realtors hire a contractor, licensed contractor, usually with an ASC certification that we require, to inspect the line and give it to us to review for the notes to repair, or they know what's happening on the report of the contractor, the licensed plumber. They will put that on the disclosure. So that's how the realtors use the CCTV most of the time. And based on the decision, the 180 days count from. So if they submit the CCTV to me for a review to get my opinion, I will send a notice to repair. And the 180 days count on the date of the letter. If they don't submit to me for review, the 180 days start counting and clicking from the sale date. So some realtors don't send to me because they want to get a little more time. No. And if you decide to do a pressure test and it's failed, you need to pay another inspection fee and do the repairs to contain the leaks that was found.
Okay, awesome, Fernanda. I'm going to power through these last couple slides and then get to our Q&A because I know you guys probably have some questions. This is a great graphic. It talks about what a shared sewer lateral is. This kind of shows what's private in red. The part that's in blue is shared. And then the public sewer that the sanitary district owns and maintains is shown in whatever color that is, orange. Fernanda talked a little bit about HOAs. Who's a member of an HOA here? Okay, so this is good. This is good information for you guys to take home and look at and talk to your HOA board or president about what system your HOA has. So this is a slide I want to spend a few minutes on, and this is kind of, I think in Todd's vision, one of the reasons why we want to have this discussion with the community, and that is possible private sewer lateral funding options for town and sanitary district 2 initiated projects. So a couple of things that may happen, and these are things that we'll take to the board to discuss, is if we're doing mainline repairs, let's say we have a sewer main line, and I think Harbor and El Camino are a couple of streets where we've inspected the main line and they're due for repair. It doesn't make a lot of sense for us to send everyone a letter and say we're going to replace the main line, so please replace your sewer lateral that you own and are required to maintain, because then you're going to tap that lateral into what, the old main, the new main, probably the new main, and so we would rather coordinate it all. So in that particular case, it makes sense that the lower lateral becomes part of the capital improvement. And then at the same time, we would ask you from the property line, from the curb face, from whatever it is, up to your home. That would be something that you could do and should do at the same time, so that we have a new system throughout. Another idea that Fernanda has been touting for the last few weeks is this economy of scale idea. So let's say we know a whole neighborhood is going to be triggered because of a capital improvement. Normally, if you go out on your own and you call a couple of plumbers, you can get an estimate for $10,000, $15,000, $5,000 if you have a short lateral, whatever the cost is to repair it. But if the town goes out and says, okay, contractors, we're going to do this whole neighborhood, what is your price per square foot? And it's going to be 150 homes, the contractor might come back and say, oh, we can do it for 20 or 25 bucks a square foot. And then we rerun the numbers, and it turns out that instead of costing you $12,000, it might only cost each homeowner $4,000. I mean, I'm making numbers up. But through economies of scale, we can certainly achieve cost savings for homeowners, and that's a program that we're going to look at. Grant programs, so Ross Valley Sanitary District and Novato, they have these $1,500 to $2,000 credit backs that basically say, okay, we're going to take your fees that we collect from you, and at the beginning of the fiscal year, we'll set aside a portion of those fees for the people who are triggered, right? So if you're required through a capital improvement program to replace your lateral, this is a set of funds that set aside to defer the cost. So if it cost you, I think in Board Member Beckman's neighborhood, it's running like $5,000 to $7,000 because the laterals are really short and it's flat. But if you live up on Christmas Tree Hill and you have this really long property, it's going to be more expensive. So, and then the last bullet I had there was just kind of facilitating lateral repairs as part of roadway improvements, which we're currently doing, but we don't have an official program for that. Todd, did you want to add anything else to this slide?
No, for me, this is where the rubber meets the road, okay? And so on a town-initiated project, so you think about us, right now we have $8,000, approximately $8 million in the bank for capital improvement projects. And we bring in about $4 million to $5 million a year as we go to continue with that infrastructure plan. So a lot of it's paving. So on town-initiated projects, like Peter said, you know, you may have a whole street and you have 100 laterals. And so what we want to do is that's the partnership program. That's like when we think about sidewalks. We want to improve our sidewalks. Well, the residents are responsible for sidewalks. But to pay $6,000 out of your pocket, even if you have 6 months advance notice, is a lot for us, okay? And so what can we do to limit the cost, share the burden, but have improved infrastructure? So really, as we go through this, I want you to think about it, and we don't need to make a decision tonight, but it's really for council to decide this, actually the sanitary district, the board. But really, it's like Peter said, if we know we're going to do the infrastructure project, we know a year in advance. And then it's like, okay, so let's get economies to scale, right? So instead of $8,000 for a lateral replacement, it's $4,000. Right? And then now the cost is $4,000 of the resident. Well, then let's look at an annual grant program. So it's first come, first serve. We know what the projects are. We budget whatever that is, $250,000 a year, $500,000 a year. And it's available to then split that $4,000 cost with the residents. You know, is that something? And it's just one concept. Like we put $1,500 up here. Ross Valley does $1,500. Novato does $2,000. We're talking concepts here. And so I think that's where there's going to be a lot of questions here. I see 2 hands that are ready to be raised. I'm happy to point that to you, but.
Let me, thanks for that, Todd. I only have a few more slides and I'm not going to spend much time on them. So what I'll do is I'll just finish this up and then we'll go to Q&A. And then I think that'll be perfect. So just a little bit of information. Fernanda put together this slide. So the ordinance became effective on August 4th. And between August 4th and December 31st, we have had more sewer permits than any of the previous years. So that tells us that, it tells me that the ordinance was needed and is working and we're improving the integrity of the system. So the more laterals that get replaced and inspected, the better off we are. I think we've had one inspection that passed because it was a recent replacement, but 99% of all laterals we've had are not in good working order, and they need to be repaired or replaced. And that's just the nature of the age of the system. It's underground. It's not like a roof. When you get a hole in your roof, you pretty much don't like the water coming on your head and you fix it right away. But when there's a hole in your sewer lateral, you don't really know about it. And so not a lot of change happens. Fernanda just put together this map that kind of outlines the boundary of the sanitary district. So earlier on, I showed you how the town boundary here is in, I don't have this one in your slideshow because it was just recently added, so it's only on the screen. But the town boundary is here in this checkered black and yellow, but the sanitary district boundary is in purple, so you can kind of see it a little better there. And the places where it's not coterminous with the town, where the sanitary district is larger than the town. Coterminous.
You can see the triggers. How many are building permits? Go back. How many are triggered by building permits for failure SSOs, private laterals, and sales. So when you zoom in later in the map, you can see the 126 permits.
Yeah, so when we put this up on the website, you'll have that information. But what Fernanda's saying is building permits are in orange, so that's someone who said they're going to do a $50,000 or greater improvement. Where a CIP project is in yellow, there's a few spots over here where there were CIP projects and those triggered. And then where there's a failure is in like dark purple or maroon, where there was a sewer spill and it caused us to have our replacement. So real quickly, I'm not going to run through all these, but this is just us as staff members saying we need help from the community. We are not on your street every day. We do not pass our noses in front of your homes all the time, and you do. So if you smell something that's wrong, if you see something that looks wrong, let us know about it. Pay attention. Sewer spills are terrible. We're right on the bay, and the water typically goes into the bay, and it's not good for anyone. So the next slide kind of talks about specifics, phone numbers. Take this home. Be our eyes and ears on the street and noses. I like this line. Did you guys know that fats, oils, and greases aren't just bad for your arteries and waistline? They're bad for the sewer system too. So they cause blockages and they clog our sewer pipes. Toilets are not trash cans. This is just a good little reminder. Have your trash can next to your toilet, have it under the sink, but throw all your trash in there. The only things we really want going in is human waste and the paper it costs to clean it, and that's about it. In fact, for those of you who travel, you know that most of the paper in other parts of the world doesn't even go in. It's thrown in the trash because it's less for the system to have to clean. Again, another slide on, don't connect your sump pump to the sewer system. Don't connect roof drains to the sewer system. Those should all go through the storm drain system. I'm not going to walk through all these pictures. They are examples of the different types of thing that Fernanda is an expert in finding. When we look at the videos, we see separated joints, we see offsets, we see fractures that are longitudinal, holes in the system. So these are all things that we look for and that you now have examples of to take home and share. So I do want to go back to Q&A, and I know Roy had his hand up, and I can go to any slide you want, but I wanted to thank you all for your attention. You did great, and I'm happy to have this discussion. Todd's going to pick up his daughter at 7:15, so I'm going to shoot for that as our end time.
Hello, my name's Roy Wolford. I wanted to follow up on what Todd was talking about, and also Peter, in coming together as a community and having wide area replacements of, thank you, wide area replacements of the sanitary system. And you were mentioning, Peter, something about smell. When Ordinance 45 was passed, something didn't smell right to me. But anyway, thank you for laughing. I have my wife. She laughs. Okay, one of the I'm looking at a macro level. So I put together a little table that showed the number of properties in the sanitary district and then the residents in Corte Madera. So the number I came up with, residents or homes and apartments, 3,802. So the 4,000 number seems to be right on there. The number I had for the sanitary district for properties that are serviced is 5,665, but that was from 2005.
Okay.
So the number of 5,800 seems pretty good. In doing a lot of research, both my wife and I, we're finding that most of the replacement cost for a lateral, and this is over in our area, Mariner Cove, is about $15,000 per line. $10,000 for the line, $5,000 for the street. So if this project is done in the CIP, we don't have to worry about the street cost. The other thing is that if we multiply the 5,000 times 15,000 times the 5,665, that's $85 million it's going to cost the property owners of the sanitary district 2. $85 million. The town, and I was talking with Tom, he thought that the lateral, if it was done under a project, CIP, I think I call it CPA when I sent information to the town council, is about $14 million. That's almost $71 million that the residents, the property owners, are going to have to pay above and beyond what they should.
Okay, so Roy, you have the mic, but I don't want you to have the mic the whole time. So here's what I'm going to do. In the next 1 or 2 minutes, hit your points, make your case, and then we're going to keep on going around.
Okay. Point. The town council and the sanitary district need to do what's best for the community. Having them spend an extra $70 million over how many years? At the earliest, this can be completed and completely wrapped up in 13 years, could take 36 years. That's way too long. Everything needs to be done under a project. The ordinance needs to be rescinded and revised and not force the one-offs, because the number I gave is the one-off proposition. That is not reasonable to do. The other thing is I think the town needs to look at, in the sanitary district, to come up with a public-private policy. San Francisco, Santa Rosa, most of Sonoma County, municipalities in East Bay all have a public-private, and the contractors we talked to, they said it's much easier to work in that type of environment in doing the lateral replacements than it is where everything is all on the property owner.
So to
And then
capture,
let's have Corte Madera and sanitary district be leaders, not followers, and saying, hey, we're doing this just because we're in line with the rest of the municipalities in the county. Let's be a leader and say, hey, we're going to do public-private partnerships. And I'd like to see if I can get a slide up. I get this slide up. I've got a graph so people can see what the public-private.
I'll summarize a slide for you. So the case. Thank you, Roy.
I also have 22 other questions.
Okay, good. Well, let's let other people ask questions. We'll come back to you for sure. But in the many conversations that Fernanda and Todd and Roy and I have had, the one way I would summarize it is Roy is an advocate for the lower lateral becoming part of the sanitary district system. He believes that the upper lateral at the property line should belong to the property owner, and that the lower lateral that is in the right-of-way should belong to the sanitary district. I think that is probably his number one
I do
thing.
also want to add, it was a very thoughtful, Roy submitted a series of thoughtful emails and supporting documents, and I think the handout that you have right there, Roy, we did make a copy of the packet. It's in the back of the room, and I encourage everybody to grab it and look at it because it's a good conversation to have. What I'll tell you is just based on, just a couple things just really quick. So if you compare us to everybody in the state, because it's important. We want to know, like, well, how are we compare? Are we doing something unusual? About 85 to 90%, and there's a document in the back that talks about sewer laterals as a definition. It's the responsibility of the lateral, the entire lateral is the responsibility of the resident. Approximately 10 to 15% are the lower lateral is the responsibility of the district or the town. So that's a conversation to have. I'll tell you the history of the town. Going back to the previous ordinance, it was always the responsibility of the city, of the residents. And so I just want to note that. I think we can play with numbers a lot, and I'll tell you our sanitary district infrastructure is over $100 million. That Paradise pump station that Peter talked about is $20 million. We have 19 pump stations in town, right? So we have probably a $75 million flood control plan that we have to institute coming up. We have we're talking about fire prevention. It's about $500,000 annually that our sales tax measure is working on right now. We have a lot of needs. When you talk about the laterals, you're really talking about over a period of 10 to 15 years. It's probably, if we do it right and we have a partnership, and I have a different definition of partnership, it's not taking ownership, but it's helping with cost. You're talking about $20 million. And so we have to talk about what that looks like. And I think we will have a plan, and that's what we're doing. And I want to share something else, because I think people hear Peter and I talk in the same meeting or in different meetings. And sometimes they may seem like they're a different message. They're not. I brought Peter Brown in here to come in here and go, Peter, I want to look out and I want to solve all of our plans. 50 years from now, that's going to be our legacy. What are we going to do? Flood control, fire prevention, all the disasters, sanitary district, develop the plan and let's institute it as a community. And so Peter's to protect the house. Ultimately, he's going to be in there and go, look, if you want to do that, this is what you have to do. And it's hard to hear. It's scary for all of us. Then you have me and the council, and we're going to give a different perspective. So you'll hear me in a sanitary district meeting giving different advice to the council. And that's good, because it's a 360-degree conversation between the community, your manager, and your district manager of like, here's the big picture, here's some options. You just don't have one option. You're going to have 3 or 4. Here's what it means. You want to take ownership of something? Well, you just added your $100 million infrastructure, and you just added another 20 to 30 million to that, right? I mean, so we just have to have this public conversation. And so I just really want to point that out, that Peter and I it's not that we disagree. That's what it was brought in for. I don't want him to sound like me. I want him to protect the house, and I want him to tell us what we need to hear. And then I'm going to try to find that path with the community, with the council, to set them up, to set Eli up for those decisions that they have to make. And so just don't get upset. This should be exciting. We're actually doing something in Corte Madera that we probably should have been doing a long time ago, having this conversation and developing a plan. So.
Okay, thanks, Todd. Let me show of hands who else wants to talk, and I'll start. I got 1, 2, 3. Okay, we'll go in that order, and then 4 here.
I actually didn't want to talk. I thought I'd keep quiet, but I'm going to say something. Whoops, there. Can you hold that for me? Yeah. I've been in Corte Madera for over 50 years. I moved to, sorry? I can't hear you. You can't hear me? Now you can. Thank you. All right. I'm a resident of Corte Madera over 50 years. I moved here in the 60s. I couldn't afford a home in San Francisco, so I came here and made our house. We live in Chapman Park, and we are on Laterals. I'm not here to talk about my particular case, but this is one of the first meetings I've been in many, many years. I'm very impressed with our city fathers and representatives today. Peter Brown did a great job. The manager's done a good thing. But I'm interested in 2 things. One, the manager mentioned something about grants. Could you clarify that in a moment? And then before I let you go on that one, if this project goes forward, can we entice the government to give us a disaster tax deduction for those people who still pay taxes? Is there any way to do that? Can your legal department find out that anyone participating in this, spending so much money, could take it off their income tax as some sort of a catastrophe? Basically, it's befallen us that without our, it just occurred like that. That's one thing. All right, that's enough for me tonight.
Yeah, just go ahead, Peter. You can.
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll flip it to you, Todd. So we have a grant program. So the Sanitary District Board, just before Board Member Beckman came on, said we need to have a low-income grant program. So for sewer laterals, that's in place. If you show us that you are, whatever it is, 50, 80% below area median income, then we have a program where we give you some money to do your lateral replacements. They really wanted that, and they said, as part of the adoption of this, develop a low-income grant program. The grant program that Todd's talking about, that Novato and Ross Valley says, is if there is a capital improvement initiated by the Sanitary District or the town of Corte Madera, then we set aside a set of funds that you all pay through your property taxes and your sewer fees, and we use that pool of money to give people whatever it is, $1,500, $2,000. So whatever it costs, we got to cap it. We're not going to say we're going to pay 100% of everybody's sewer lateral charge, but we want to defer the costs.
So that's right. So what we would do is we would plan out, right? So we'll develop a 2 to 5 year capital improvement plan. And so within it, well, as we do our streets, we're going to look at below the streets and do them together. And we would plan out, okay, hey, we think we're going to do 300 laterals, this coming year. And then we would budget that, and get approval from the council. And so that's what we call it, a grant, but really it's first come, first serve. There's some, justification for that. The other one is from a tax deduction, I don't know of anything, but I'll tell you 2 big initiatives, and it's something that we'll look into. It's a good idea, and so we'll research that. But 2 big initiatives that we've been focused on, all of our flood control that we've done over the decades. Dave Bracken was a big part of that in our public works team. We get up to a 20% discount if the town has a certain rating. Now we've taken that same philosophy for the hills, because we've never done anything for fire prevention. So we have our first FireWise community. And so now we have a $500,000 plan, and it's already being instituted this fiscal year, where you can now, if you become a FireWise community, a neighborhood, you can get up to a 20% discount for fire insurance. And so we have really focused on those 2 initiatives. But what you're talking about under the ground and having, some tax breaks, it's a good concept. And if you know of anything, please.
Well,
zone.
okay, so I'm just going to use the mic for you. So your fire insurance went up $400 because you're in a fire zone, and that is because of the level of disaster we've had and the correction in the market from the fire systems.
I'm 1 block from the fire department, and I got a hydrant right across the street, and they said I'm in a fire.
So here's the dirty little secret that we have in our community. So we're susceptible to earthquakes, fire, and flood, right? So check this out. Half of our community is in the flood zone, and the other half is in the high-risk fire zone. I think there's 2 streets that aren't. So Meadowcrest is the first community, sir, and you follow under the same one on Chapman Park if you're over here. So they just became a FireWise community at the end of the year. So they have a 20% discount. They didn't go up that amount. They actually get a discount because they followed the prevention as a neighborhood. And so we help you facilitate. We pay for that. That your sales tax monies pays for that. And so through the neighborhood response groups in your neighborhoods, we're starting the initiative now, so look out for that.
Okay. I sense a fire workshop coming up, but I'm going to peel us back to the private sewer lateral system, and I have 1, 2, 3 more hands.
So I received a letter from the town a couple months ago that the Tamla Vista Complete Streets project was going to be done, and we needed to get our lateral sewer inspected. And I'm a little confused because the handout looked like I needed to get a permit. Do I need to get a permit for the inspection? That's the first question. Second question is, if the inspection shows something, then should we wait for this economy of scale possibility, and also the grant possibilities that Todd has spoken of, that maybe, I guess it's just possibility right now. So,
Cheryl, great question. So Fernanda handles all of our sewer permits. So typically, you do need to get a sewer permit for that process. And there's 2 phases. There's the inspection, which is relatively cheap. You hire a plumber, they run a camera down there, and we just kind of know the status of your line. If, as we found out, a lot of the older lines need replacement, then there's the actual physical cost of replacing it. In your particular case, for Tamla Vista, I would say waiting is the right thing. The inspection should be done. So run the video camera down there, tell us the results, show us the results. But because we are looking at the process of deciding, should we replace the main line? Should we only do spot repairs on that? Should Tamla Vista Complete Streets project happen this summer or next summer? Those are questions we don't have the answers to. What would happen on our last project for our pavement management program is we knew the pavement was coming and we wanted to get those letters out, and we didn't give people enough time. And I think we might have overcorrected and sent those Tamla Vista letters out a little too early. So in your case, you're good. You can inspect it now. You can hold, but I think a lot of good things are coming. The pressure test would not be part of the inspection. So the inspection is simply the video camera. The pressure test is once you've replaced your line and you want to prove to us that it's done properly and correctly, then you have the pressure test. So that's the last step.
Does depend how they made a deal with the plumber, the licensed contractor. Some of contractors will televise for free, and you say, I want to pressure test my line. So prior to pressure test, they will run the camera to see if your line is going to pass or not. And he'll tell you, oh, we can just apply for pressure test. Your line is good. It's going to pass. They'll do the test and will confirm that. Others, we're going to say, no, your line is not going to pass. No way. You need to get a permit for repair or replacement. They will guide you. So all depends how you deal with your contractor, how you say. If you say, I need a pressure test, he's going to do different. I'm right, Ken?
Okay, so yeah, we don't typically do that, and we're going to use the mic. I don't know if everybody heard, but because we're recording this and it's going to be on video later, I'm going to ask everybody that talks to use the mic. So yeah, it's not a good idea to go right in with a pressure test. It's usually better to do the video inspection first. Okay, so then let's get over here, and then I have a question over there.
Thank you, Peter. Peter Chase on Montecito, and I think you told me that you're going to repave that street coming soon. So in my experience, the bulk of the cost for many street sewer line replacements is from the curb to the main, because you're paying the specialized contractor to do that. I don't know if that's the case in Corte Madera, and if your guy's permit is more money from the curb to the street, because that's a street permit versus just the lateral permit up to the house. So I don't know if there's a separation. I happen to know my break is in the street and about 4 foot from the main. And I am hearing that kind of break would fall into the repair scope that you're talking about. And
I think in your case on Montecito, because we believe that the sewer main may need repair, and we definitely know the road needs repair, that's going to be a capital improvement where we don't know the outcome. We have to take it to the board. But you hear from all of us, we see there's some advantages to doing economy of scale and to wrapping the lower lateral replacements as a part of that. That's the most, I would say, the most likely scenario that we'll see going forward. And you're right. So it depends on the property. So when you say the greatest cost is between point A and B, it depends on what neighborhood you're in. It depends on the condition of the line, the steepness of the slope, the length of the driveway. All those things are variables. And what we found is that our particular ordinance has changed the local market. So because we adopted this ordinance, we've driven up the demand and made all the plumbers and inspectors really busy. And so they are tending to rise their prices. So it's a demand and supply thing. And so because this is going to be happening over a long period of time, I believe that more contractors, more plumbers are going to come here because they know we have a lot of work and we have a system that needs improvement. You had your hand up?
I keep hearing about all of the costs, but I don't have any specifics. Can you give me a better idea about what we're talking about? We're talking about a permit. Excuse me. We're talking about hiring a plumber. We got to get a video. We got to do all these things. Then we got to do a pressure test. I mean, I have no idea what you're talking about in terms of costs.
Okay, that's a great question. I'm going to let Fernanda give some recent examples, or anyone else in the room who's knowing about the cost, but I'm going to lead with this. There are a lot of variables. Permits, we're talking hundreds of dollars, right? $150, $300. Our permits, are in that range. And then when it comes to, say, a project on Board Member Beckman Street, traffic control isn't a big deal. If you live on a quiet residential street, creating a way for cars to drive around the work is pretty easy, and it doesn't cost a lot of money. If, on the other hand, you live where Miss Longinati lives on Tamil Vista, and there's 16,000 vehicles a day, traffic control is going to be your biggest expense. It's not digging the hole. It's not replacing the line. It's figuring out how to keep traffic flowing if you do a one-off thing. That's why the economies of scale is really important. But what we told the board when we adopted the ordinance was that the whole thing costs between $8,000 and $12,000 for on average. But I'll let Fernanda and anyone else in the room talk about more recent numbers.
We have a contractor here, and I'll pass to him. I think he'll give you a little more clarification on their side.
But what about our fees?
So from permits, We charge a sewer permit for a pressure test, $150. If you need to do a repair in the line, install a clean out and test, is $300. And if you're gonna do a major work on the line, major repair or a full replacement, is $500. And now he's gonna talk and give you the perspective on the contract side, costs. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah. Hi, folks. My name's Ken. I'm a contractor here in Marin. If you want to approach me afterwards, I'll gladly give you a card. I'm not going to say who I'm with right now. Where do I start? Costs. My average cost is $13,500 for a flat line lateral, 60 feet long. Okay. Permits range from 150 to 500 plus. An encroachment permit in Nevada right now currently is $550. I know you don't live in Nevada, that's the most expensive one around. If you're a county resident, it's nearly that much right now. It's $548 for an encroachment permit. That's permission for me as your contractor to dig in the street. Okay? The cost of scale concept is a real cool one. It does work. There's a lot that goes into it. I've been involved in a few of those projects. I would encourage you guys to investigate it. I don't think that you're going to gain all your goals through that. It's not possible for you to generate and spend that kind of money, as you guys have said. You've got millions of dollars you're spending in millions of different directions. I'm sorry. And eventually you folks are going to have to probably lump up and do some of these replacements out of your pocket. The idea of the lower laterals is great. I've worked for a couple sanitary districts that maintain those. It's a clear-cut line. Does cut down the costs. It is true, costs digging in the streets very great. That's where I have to dig down. Who said they were over in the? You're over there in the lowland, wetland area. So I just looked at in the swamp. I just looked at a lateral there the other day. The main is about 6.5 feet deep. Here's what they don't tell you. I have to deal with groundwater, and I can't just dump it in the sewer. I can't dump it in the storm drains. I have to filter it, and I have to control it, because the State Water Resources Board, the same people that are driving this Ordinance 45, by the way, these folks didn't have a choice in this. Your State Water Resources Board did. And yes, it should have been done a long time ago. They won't allow that. They won't allow me to put silt in the streams. They won't allow any of that business. So that's a big driving cost. If you live on a hill, I have to deal with slide remediation. Because if I dig a hole in the ground and it rains 5 inches next week, what's going to happen? That's going to end up on the bottom down here on Corte Madera, and we don't want that. So it's a lot of factors. I really encourage you guys to look into it. Call a contractor. Ask them for a video inspection first. Don't ask for a pressure test. I've had one line in 5 years past.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so we're looking at our last 12 minutes. So more questions, more comments?
One more question. In the case of a shared sewer lateral, if one, you call it an upper lateral, is defective, how does that impact the other upper laterals? I mean, because you have to do a pressure test. If you have to do a pressure test, it involves all the laterals.
So that's a good question. So, so typically when you inspect a lateral, we want you to inspect the whole thing, right? So you expect the part when it leaves your building to the part where it connects to the main. That's the ideal scenario. So in your particular case, in your example, if your upper lateral has the damage, but the lower lateral is intact, that's kind of easy, because then what we ask you to do is repair the upper lateral, connect to the point where the lower lateral is in good condition, and then your neighbor is almost unbothered, right? Because you've done the work. The more tricky question is, let's say it's the reverse. Let's say your upper lateral is in good place, and the shared lateral is the one that is damaged. What the sanitary district and what most sanitary districts statewide ask you to do is, okay, you guys are sharing a resource, split the cost. Fernanda and I got involved. I think it was it on Tamil Vista? We helped a couple property owners figure out how to do that, and we worked out. We found a solution where they shared the costs. The other scenario, which is also quite common, is we don't need to have shared laterals in this particular case. So what we're going to do is, since we have to replace our upper lateral, we're just going to connect straight to the main, and we're going to let go of that shared connection. So that's another way to kind of separate things out and make it cleaner going forward. Okay. Other questions? Hold on a second, Roy. Let me get you the mic.
Okay, feedback on the lateral testing. My wife and I have called quite a few contractors, and if you're interested in getting our experience, see me after the meeting. I'll tell you that some contractors, like Fernanda said, will say they're going to fail, so don't even bother, particularly with a pressure test. So that's good advice. The video inspection, we had one contractor come out and took a look at a video inspection of the line. And that was no charge. Another one is going to come out and take a look and make an assessment. We have another contractor, who's a plumber, that said that they would only come out if you paid the special fee of $99 for today, but usually it's $299. So it runs the gambit. You probably should be able to get at least an inspection and just have a contractor come out and tell you generally what's going to happen. We won't tell you specifically unless you do all of the, the permits and everything else. So you won't get that nailed down.
Okay. Anything else? What else can we help you understand or fund or I don't know, make you happy?
Happy. Holly Axtell, Manzanita Avenue. So if by some fluke you passed the tests, then how often do you, and they pave the street again, how often do you have to have this test run?
That's a good question. So if you remember back to Fernanda's slide for, I think we called it exemptions or, there they are. So the short answer to your particular question is you're good for 3 years. So if the town comes back within a 3-year period and says, we're going to do something, you would say, here's my certificate of compliance. I had a test within the last 3 years and I passed, so I should be good. If you had to replace it, it's 10 years. And that's just blanket approval for 10 years. The cool thing about, I think, both of these particular situations is this is what you get without any discussion or negotiation other than just to prove that it's been repaired or replaced recently. What we've found is that when you do that and you use modern materials and your contractor does a good job of connecting everything, you would only need to do a video inspection. And what I'm saying is, if you did a good job and you say, okay, I'm beyond the 3 years, I'm in year 4, but let's run the video down there and I'll probably pass a pressure test and then you're out. You don't have to do anything else. The real cost isn't in the permit or the inspection or the pressure test. The real cost is in the replacement. That's where 90 to 95% of the cost is. So I would just say once you repair it or replace it, you're probably good for longer than the amount of years you have.
The truth is until you get trigger again. So you have a ladder for 3 years, but if you're not trigger again,
Okay, I love it that we have 6 minutes left and we have a few more questions, comments. I'm going to go right behind you and then I'll come to you. Okay.
I'm wondering whether or not there are certain approved inspectors for the group. I mean, can just any plumber come and run a video and that's okay? Or do you have a certain number of, say, 12 that are, are supposedly okay and do a good job and so forth?
So this is a Fernanda question. She has put together a list and it's on our website.
Yes, I do have a list here. So the other problem we saw, so when we create a sewer lateral ordinance, I invite all the contractors, licensed plumbers to come here, fill up a form, read our standards that it was updated, understand the sewer lateral requirements. If they want to be part on the list, they need to sign all that and make sure, ask me all the questions prior. So The contractors that are on the website, they did that. Also, we check their license. What type of work they can do. Some guys, they only can CCTV. Others cannot go in the street. So that list has a check and tell you what their license for, which we saw that a lot of people are getting sewer permits in a lower price. And then when I start checking, they didn't have a license to be digging on the street. So they didn't compact, they didn't have shore. You see that belly after paving, you know? So we start getting more restricted. And that's why I put this list together to help guide you guys.
Thanks, Fernanda. Okay, one or two more questions. I know Todd's got to go. Yeah.
Do you have a list? You're planning to replace all the sewer lines in Corte Madera at some point. So if we don't want to do our lateral until you're doing our street, how do we find out?
So we have a sewer master plan that is in draft form that needs a little more work and updating. We'll, I think, within this year. Yeah, so within this year, say give us till December, we'll have that updated and on the website, and it'll really rank the projects from the most needed. I threw out the ones that I know that are next. I mean, Cheryl knows about Tamla Vista. We know about Harbor and El Camino. Those are sewer lines that need replacement in the near term. And then we're looking at, really, Fernanda's done a great job of coming in here and really caring about the sanitary district. We haven't had a full-time dedicated staff. She actually does a lot of other stuff for Public Works, but she cares about the integrity of the sanitary district a lot, and it shows in her work. And so what we're having her do, Todd and I are having her coordinate with our pavement manager. So RJ Suko is managing our pavement program, and they're really now spending a lot of time together saying, okay, how much pavement, what's your highest ranked project versus mine? If Fernanda's number 3 is close to RJ's number 1 for pavement and sewer, maybe we combine them and we do them both at the same time. So we're really, I think, doing a good job of starting that process of coordinating. But the short answer to your question is, I would say by the December of this year, we should have the updated sewer master plan up on the website. And if you want, Fernanda's number's in here, and if you call her, she can probably tell you what she knows is coming up, because she has a good idea of that. And the other thing I'll say before I turn it over to Todd for any closing comments is, I really appreciated what you said, Todd, about reasons for hiring me. I mean, I care about the infrastructure, the transportation system, the safety of people who take buses or drive or walk or bike, the flood control system, all of the pump stations, challenging with sea level rise, wildfire mitigation. Being a public works director is just the most challenging job I've ever had. But I like it, and I care about the long-term integrity of our infrastructure, and I'll never stop doing that, and I'm happy to talk with all of you at any time about that.
Everyone can use Starbucks. It's toilet free, I understand.
Starbucks is, okay.
Would there be any possibility?
Corte Madera lower.
Would there be any possibility that we could have somebody for our neighborhood response group, if we got a group together, have you come up in that neighborhood and ask any questions and kind of go over where their processes are?
Absolutely. We're happy to do that.
Always. We'd love to come to you. So whether it's just 2 neighbors or a whole group, we'll always come to you. And just one other thing I just want to point out, because this is a big, finances is a big part, right? The big picture. So we have it's called a finance subcommittee. Larry Reed, who's in the room, is actually part of it. It's staff and a few community members in all things finances. We meet for unfunded liabilities. We meet for everything. So the sanitary district conversation is going to be coming to the finance subcommittee in the coming months. We'll put that out to the whole community. If you have questions about finance, just money with what we're talking about, please come to that. And that's the forum to give your input on the plan before it actually goes to the council. So we'll ask the sanitary district staff to give a presentation or a subcommittee. We'll talk about a series of plans. We'll take public comment. We'll problem solve as a group. And ultimately, this will come to the sanitary district through a process, a series of community meetings, the financial side with the subcommittee, and then we'll set the sanitary district board up for success to make a decision. And so that's what we're looking at between now and the fiscal year, so June 30th.
Okay, my closing remark is I would like for all of you to take a moment to think about how much work it was to look at all of the other private sewer lateral ordinances in the region, to rewrite our ordinance, to take it to council 2 times, to do all of the permitting for the sewer system, to put together this slideshow. We need to give Fernanda Stefanik a round of applause because she has been absolutely, I think she's working harder than she did at her last job. I'm just going to guess. But thank you, Fernanda, for all your work in this. You deserve a lot of kudos. And thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.